Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining another VisionServe Alliance webinar. Today, we are talking about the EDVI Act. And the title of the webinar is A Strong System for Children's Vision, Advancing the Early Detection of Vision Impairments for Children Act. And our presenters are longtime friends and collaborators of VisionServe, Sara Brown, who is the Senior Director of Government Affairs, and Kira Baldonado, the Executive Vice President of Prevent Blindness. So they're going to walk us through this wonderful new act and tell us how we can help get it passed. I know it's a crazy time, but this is good stuff, and I think it will benefit everyone across the country. We will take questions, so you can enter that into the Q&A as we move forward, and Helen will call on you, and we'll take some at the end of the presentation as well. So with that, Sara?
Thanks so much, Lee. And my thanks to you and to Helen and to Jason and everyone at VisionServe Alliance for the opportunity to talk to you today about this exciting legislation, the Early Detection of Vision Impairments for Children Act. Really quickly, the bill number is HR 2527. I'm sure that question will come up, so I'll just address it right off the forefront. I'm Sara Brown. I'm Senior Director of Government Affairs, and I'm joined by Kira Baldonado, our Executive Vice President, and we are the organization behind the EDVI Act. So Helen, if you can advance to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about what that is. So the EDVI Act is very exciting legislation that Prevent Blindness has been thrilled to be a part of since its inception. We're the organization that thought of the idea, but this is certainly something that we leveraged the expertise and knowledge and the collegiality of all of our partners across the vision and eye health community, public health practitioners, eye care providers, and organizations that represent everyone within the children's health space, including school nurses, pediatricians, primary care providers, and many others, to really identify where there was a gap that was missing in children's vision and eye health, or children's health altogether, at the federal level. So I'm happy to go into the story of this, but just a couple of quick high points about the EDVI Act. This was reintroduced in the House earlier this spring by Congressman Gus Bilirakis, Republican representing the 12th District of Florida, and Congressman Mark Vesey representing Texas 33, a Democrat. So very excited that this is a bipartisan piece of legislation. Both Congressman Bilirakis and Vesey are co-chairs of the Congressional Vision Caucus, and they were the original co-sponsors in the 118th Congress, which was last year. Different bill number at that point, but we're so excited to work with them again, and both of them are very engaged members of Congress to work with. Very excited that they see the importance of vision and eye health from a children's perspective. Both of them also have very personal connections to children's vision and eye health, and occasionally we post some of their information about the stories that connect them to this issue and their motivation to work on this issue with us, just across our social media channels and a couple of other places. Very excitingly, this legislation has been endorsed by over 100 organizations nationally, and these are both state, community, national representation organizations, including VisionServe Alliance. I'll talk a little bit more about what organizational endorsement means towards the end of this presentation, but this is a really strong showing of support, not just from communities within the vision and eye health space, but also representing children and families, school health, primary care, pediatric care, a number of other organizations that are really just focused on public health and the community health approach, ensuring that children have all of their needs addressed within the healthcare space and are set up for a foundation of independent learning, living, and engagement across their lifespan, starting as young as possible. Again, we'll go more into detail about this, but again, so just a couple of high points here. The EDVI Act would establish programs across all of the United States. Eventually, we expect that all 50 states will have an EDVI program, as well as all territories of the U.S. and other communities, such as tribal organizations. And the aim of this legislation and these programs is to foster coordinated systems of care for children's vision and eye health. And if this passes, this would be the first federal program that specifically addresses children's vision and eye health in the United States. There currently is no program that addresses children's vision and eye health. So we're excited that this legislation would be one of the first ones to do just that. And this really is pioneering, groundbreaking legislation in that respect. And this is something that, because of the political headwinds that we are facing here in Washington, we need everyone's voice to be lent and to be part of this effort to ensure that ultimately we do get the EDVI Act passed and that children and communities are supported when it comes to children's vision and eye health. So just a quick story about the EDVI Act. Everything has to have a beginning. And so as the song goes, this is a very good place to start. If you're familiar with Prevent Blindness, we have operated our National Center for Children's Vision and Eye Health. This is an organization that Kira, my colleague, spearheaded since its inception in 2009. Initially, this center was funded on a small grant out of the Maternal and Child Health Bureau at the Health Resources and Services Administration, MCHB HRSA. And really that program by itself was groundbreaking at its own time. We were able to find a champion who worked at HRSA who identified that this was something that was largely missing in the federal rubric of children's programming, and really worked with us to set aside some funding within the SPRANS line, which is a small collection of funding that goes towards developing children's programs and addressing children's needs, especially in the children with special healthcare needs area. But this funding was used to start that national center, and Kira can tell you all about the success of that program, but over time we helped to develop all sorts of screening guidelines and protocols because there really was none at one point with respect to children as young as 0 to 3, school-age children, preschool-age children, and all the way up through adolescents. And we didn't really have any of those professional guidelines to help develop that system of care or to ensure, where to start when it came to if you're a, school administrator or public health administrator and you see that children's vision and eye health is missing in your community, not really understanding where to start and what kind of practices are best protocols and things. So the National Center at Prevent Blindness really was groundbreaking in its own right to help establish the foundation for the EDVI Act. Because of the success of the National Center and just the work that Kira has done over the years, and now our colleague Donna Fishman, who oversees the center now and has since 2018, we've really identified that there's just a strong need for protocols and procedures and guidelines and just general resource support and, building that network of support across states and communities, parents and families, providers, and everybody that touches the lives of a child and their health and development. So we took a look at, what legislation could we, leverage to help ensure that children's vision and eye health wasn't seen as so much as an afterthought in other programs, but could really stand out on its own as a natural part of children's health and development in the programs at the federal level, and just what kind of support states needed. So we took a look at this process after identifying a champion on Capitol Hill. We were just meeting with the office and we were looking to secure some additional funding through the appropriations process, and their recommendation was that we took a look at some authorizing legislation to make sure that the funding we were asking for would be grounded in some sort of a statute, because otherwise it would be incredibly difficult to turn around, different project goals and timelines and things if we only had a short amount of time. That is the federal budget and appropriations season, which would be about one fiscal year. And then we would have to come back time and again and continue to prove the need for this funding. That gets really, really difficult from a program administration perspective. And it's just really difficult to measure progress over time and ensure that the interventions that are taking place on the ground reflect the intent of the funding that Congress has implemented. So we took a look at other programs, both Kira and myself, to see what could make the most sense for children's vision and eye health. And our goal really was that we wanted to find something that enjoyed strong public support, continue to be reauthorized by Congress, but has really shown to work and to be something that can be replicated for children's vision and eye health. This is something that, we took a look at a number of the programs that were across the board, but we needed something that didn't just address an immediate concern of some kind. We needed something that was a little bit more static. So by that, I mean, not responding to things like the pandemic or, different trends in children's health, but really something that continues to be a need that needs to be addressed just as we go through the years, and just needs to be a mainstay in children's healthcare altogether. About that time, we drafted up this legislation. Again, our Democratic legislative champion was instrumental in helping us develop the right approach, make sure that, all the, T's are dotted and the I's are crossed, so to speak, with making sure that we had the right approach. And then we started the process of looking for a Republican to co-lead with our Democratic champion. And this is one thing that, Prevent Blindness was clear on from the start. We wanted this to be a bipartisan effort, not only because that sounds nice and, we should be getting along, and children's health is not a partisan issue, or it shouldn't be in our view, but so that it could ultimately withstand some of these political wins over time. And so having it be bipartisan was one of our guiding principles in this entire journey to have this legislation introduced. It will continue to be all the way through the time that we get this passed, hopefully. So I will say, I only bring that up not only because it's, important to mention intentionally, but it could add a little bit of time for, this to actually come to fruition. But it's something that we just wanted to make sure was part of this effort from the beginning. If you notice the dates there, just kind of on the screen, April 2019 to December 2019. Obviously, that's a little bit quiet, but then starting to look for Republicans in 2020. The pandemic didn't do us any favors with looking for those co-leads. And so we did kind of have to step back a little bit and sort of let the pandemic legislating and response sort of work itself out. But ultimately, we decided that moving over to the House for 2022 could be a better strategy to ultimately get this legislation introduced. All in all, I would say we're in about year 7 of the EDVI Act having, being a thing. It's just that it's only just, come up in the last 2 years since it's been introduced with the rest of the vision community. So this has been a very long time coming. If for any reason your organizations out there are looking for legislation to introduce, be prepared for a very, very long journey. It is most definitely a marathon. It is absolutely not a sprint, especially if you have the goals of keeping it a bipartisan, bill. If it's good policy, not something that just responds one time to a problem and then just kind of goes away, but you want something to sort of be everlasting. Really buckle down, because it's going to be, unless things change politically and work in your favor, it could be a very long journey from start to finish. So we did finally see the day when we got this bill introduced. It was an incredibly exciting day. Here pictured is our CEO, Jeff Todd, shaking hands with Congressman VC, our Democratic co-lead on this bill. At the inception, when this bill was introduced in May of 2024, we only had about 18 organizations that had endorsed the legislation. And again, now that number is well over 100. So incredible success to see that happen, and wonderful to see that kind of support from the community. By the end of 2024, we did have 10 co-sponsors in the House, 5 Republican, 5 Democrat, including Bill Arrakis and VC. That number had gone from 18 to about 90. And we were able to use a couple of internal projects and events to really draw attention to the EDVI Act. Eyes on Capitol Hill, which is our patient fly-in, our legislative advocacy day. And this was also a key agenda item for World Sight Day 2024. We had a congressional briefing and a vision screening and education event. The theme that year just so happened to be Love Your Children's Eyes. So this worked perfectly well to implement the EDVI Act and some of those talking points and to really push support for that. Unfortunately, though, every 2 years, any business that is not passed into law at the end of the congressional session would need to be reintroduced, which is why we had to reintroduce it this year. If we don't get it passed by end of next year, we'll need to do the same and continue to work that process until we pick up more speed and hopefully get that passed. So we'll talk about what the EDVI Act is, and we'll certainly go into a lot more detail about this important legislation. Ultimately, though, the goal of the EDVI Act is to ensure that every child with a possible vision problem is identified and connected to care as soon as possible. Ideally, this would help create that system of care to make sure that if a child misses a vision screening, there is another option for a screening. If somehow the child fails the vision screening, they are referred immediately to an eye care provider to ensure that there's diagnosis and treatment and just further evaluation if a vision problem even exists. Following that, making sure that there's a follow-up mechanism in place to make sure that a child that did fail a vision screening ultimately does see the eye care provider and receives the necessary treatment needed. But even further after that, part of the EDVI Act's goals is to ensure that if the child and family need additional support, this could be in the way of, services like understanding your child's condition and what this might mean for his or her future, connecting them with support services, assistive learning devices and technologies, and just even talking to other families about their experiences and how they connected their children to care. All of these things really do play a huge role in creating that system of care. And so ultimately, this is the approach that the EDVI Act provides. And we want to make sure that all of these things happen before a vision problem goes long undetected. But if there is the presence of a vision problem, that the child and the family is supported all the way throughout the care journey and not just, at one point or another during this care journey. So you might be wondering why in a town where acronyms are king, why we're calling it the EDVI Act. There is a reason for that. And I always tell everyone this. Sometimes I think of, what different acronyms could we have come up with to make this a little bit more catchy. But the reason that we're calling it the EDVI Act is because this closely models a program that is in existence that some of you might have already heard about, the Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Program, or the EDDI program. So hopefully it'll be EDDI and EDVI, sort of a marketing technique. More importantly, though, the EDDI program was one of the programs that we identified as something that could very easily be replicated for children's vision and eye health. And the EDDI program itself, interestingly, was spearheaded by Congressman Michael Bilirakis, who I believe is the father of Gus Bilirakis, back in 1999, 2000. So when the EDDI Act became law and it was implemented, at that time, only about 10% of infants in our country were being screened for hearing disorders or potential hearing loss or communication disorders, and then referred to specialty hearing care. And now this number, because of the EDDI program, is now about 96% as of 2022. And most importantly, about 70% of infants are receiving that early interventive hearing care before reaching 6 months of age. I'm not an expert on the hearing side of things, but from what I understand, the hearing community was able to come up with a set of best practices and protocols that really helped to solidify the need for the EDDI program and some of the interventions that they stress. For example, they, EDDI administrators will say that it's important for a child a newborn, to receive hearing screening by 1 month of age. By 3 months of age, that child should have received a diagnosis and a treatment plan, and by 6 months, they should be receiving that early interventive care. Children's vision is a little bit different in our own right with that sort of periodicity, but there is still one that exists nonetheless for children's vision and eye health. And this is very similar to the same approach that we want to implement at the community and state level to make sure that children are actually receiving the right care at the right time and ultimately being connected to care. So the EDDI program does three main things that the EDVI Act will also emulate as well. The EDDI Act creates grants for states and communities. Right now, because they've been around for a lot longer, every state in the country is receiving approximately $250,000 a year. And 9 territories are also receiving that grant funding to establish systems of hearing care. There are also technical assistance efforts. EDDI has 3. EDVI will start with 1. And it also promotes federal collaboration and coordination across different entities. So, for example, if a grantee, at least on the EDVI side, receives funding, that organization would need to coordinate with folks in the Part B and C for IDEA, Medicaid, CHIP, all of those components would need to be in there. And there's also some federal coordination and collaboration at HHS and between the Department of Education. EDDI authorizes about 18 million for grants for states and communities, and we'll get into the numbers in a second, but by comparison, EDVI would fund 5 million for grants for states and communities to start out with, and we think that could potentially fund up to 10 states to begin with. We'll get to the 50 at some point, plus territories. And on the technical assistance side, it's a match. So another 5 million for technical assistance, very similar to the EDDI program. MCHB HRSA would likely oversee the EDVI Act and the program administration of those grants, while CDC and CBDDD, a very long name, National Center for Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities, would oversee the technical assistance efforts. And we hope that that would be in coordination with the CDC's Vision Health Initiative and the Vision and Eye Health Surveillance System. I will caveat this by saying, yes, we're very aware that things are a little bit different in the federal space with respect to what programs are there and who's, everything that's happening. But ideally, this is what we would like to see. And this is the legislative approach at this point in time. So again, EDVI grants for states and communities, initially that $5 million to start out with. This is per year over 5 years. And this also establishes grants for competitive grants. It would be a competitive grant to start out with, but a state entity, for example, a Department of Health and Human Services or Department of Public Health, Children and Families at the state level would be able to establish cooperative agreements with organizations on the ground as they see fit. And so eligible entities for this includes states, and again, that's that Department of Children, Families and Health, territories or tribal organizations, or Indian communities. And grantees must consult with community and state partners for program and policy development as use of this funding. And I'm going to turn things over to Kira to share a little bit about the context of this legislation and just the need for EDVI. Kira.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to VSA for having us here today. One of the questions that we often get when we're speaking with legislators or their staff is like, okay, so there's no federal program for children's vision, but do we really need one? Yes, the answer is always yes, but let's talk about why. So just looking at the way states are approaching children's vision and eye health through their laws is a wide variation. If you look from one state to the next where those laws do exist, and I'll tell you how many states have those laws here in a moment, we see that in one state, you may have early detection practices with vision screening for grades kindergarten and first grade, and that's the last time the kids are getting vision screening. In the next state, they may have preschool age vision screening and vision screening throughout the school years every other year up through 9th or 10th grade. So one state is definitely not on parity with the next in the way that laws are laid out. Oftentimes, many states have very poor protocols for referrals to eye care or follow-up procedures and practices. So while the vision screenings may be taking place and kids may be referred, the follow-up to care is really lacking because there are poor resources really dedicated to that. We also have very poor data collection to see who's getting care and who isn't, where the disparities may lie, and where extra efforts, education, or support may be needed. And then we really do see a limited understanding of why kids may not be following up to eye care. So what do they need to have for those supports? Do they need more parent education? Do we need things in different languages? Do we need to have supports for parents to be able to take the child to an eye care provider? There's many reasons beyond just the parent didn't take the child, why they may not be getting to that eye care provider. But also having an absence of a strong national system in place means that parents don't have a chance to be educated about the importance of vision and eye health for their child from the very beginning. We don't have a standardized approach to educating, getting that integrated into public health practices, community health practices, primary health care, to really emphasize the role for vision and how that should be assessed, how children may need to be connected to vision rehabilitative support services or assistive educational services in the case where there is a vision loss. Right now, every state's kind of left to their own capacity, their own depth and willingness that they're able to commit to children's vision and eye health, which makes it kind of a patchwork quilt appearance and what we're doing in this country to support children's vision. So there's just an increased fragmentation and allowance of issues in access to eye care, eye health status, disparities leading to learning outcomes that vary by population to population. So Sarah mentioned the work of the National Center for Children's Vision and Eye Health, and I appreciate that, Sarah. Just to emphasize the importance that a set of technical assistants and experts and leaders to guide implementation of children's vision can come from a look at just the basic number of states that actually have legislation in place. When the National Center for Children's Vision and Eye Health started in 2009, there were 32 states and the District of Columbia that had legislation in place around school age vision screening, with 12 states having preschool age vision screening. So there was not a lot happening necessarily in children's vision screening and eye health at the state legislative level. From the work of the National Center, the technical assistance it's provided, we're now up to 41 states and the District of Columbia that have school age vision screening legislation in place, and 32 states with preschool age vision screening. And everybody might be thinking, well, it needs to be more, it needs to be 50, it needs to be the territories, and we're working on it. But that's where a program that EDVI offers can help us get to those sort of standards. And we recognize that vision screenings, early detection strategies don't guarantee that children are getting a vision screening. There's a need to make sure that we're addressing those barriers. We're giving best practices around the types of tools people are using, the way that we're supporting professional implementation, and really monitoring state by state. Looking at those issues around cultural competencies and making sure that we have the systems in place to monitor what's happening, not just at the state level, but what's happening at the community level. Because even within a state, there's wide variation between one community to the next. And so we need to have that consistent approach to surveillance and support across the country. So one of the tools that we have developed in the last few years is the Children's Vision Health Map. I'm not sure if you all are aware of it, but I wanted to make sure that this is a resource this group was aware of, especially as we're looking at the wide variations in presence of different vision problems, vision impairment, blindness, access to care, access to treatments, including eyeglasses, really does vary in our country. And so this is a map that we worked on with NORC at the University of Chicago, and they helped us to build an interactive map, but also to produce a report that accompanies this map. So I'll show you the impact of having this kind of interactive data here on the next slide. But what this map will do is look at different vision issues, but also different types of populations. It will look at different social determinants of health. It can look at distribution of eye care providers, and really see where differences in access to providers, to different types of eye conditions, to in-state variations. And this is powerful information to have on hand as you're talking to state policymakers, federal policymakers, on why this type of legislation is needed to really improve the overall parity in children's vision and eye health. So I'm going to go to the next slide so you can see what the map might look like after you enter in a bunch of these variables. So it becomes quite more colorful. And so this map here on the right-hand side, which has variations in color from dark teal to orange all the way to light gray, shows at the county level within a state the variation in rates of any vision loss. Anybody whose visual acuity is worse than the better seeing eye of 20/40 or worse off. So this is really rates of vision impairment, blindness. And so this map is for children ages 0 to 17. And you can really start to see variations from this lighter gray to orange in the northern states, northern middle states, to variations to very dark teal, higher prevalence of vision impairment, blindness as you get around the California coast, all throughout the south and southeast. And so there is a sort of diamond-shaped key in the corner where you can see overlays of presence of vision loss, more or less. So it's quite detailed and nuanced in the map it can present. This is something that you can look at variations between males and females. You can look at variations by specific races. You can add to this locations of federally qualified health centers. And like I said, you can add to this locations of different eye care providers, even to different eye care provider specialists. So if you want to see where all the ocularists are in the United States, you can even get down to that granular level. It's pretty cool. So it's a fun tool. It draws on data from Medicaid. It draws on data from the National Survey of Children's Health. And so it uses a variety of different tools to present this data. And we will actually be updating the Medicaid data utilized in this map. I believe it's currently using 2018 data, so pre-pandemic, and we're about to update it to 22-23 Medicaid data. So that is going to be in process. But just looking at the data we had to analyze, we found some key things. We found that 600,000 children in the US had uncorrectable visual acuity loss, 45,500 who were blind. 1 out of every 122 children have uncorrectable vision loss. That's a stat that's a little easier to understand for that staff person, that legislator. 1 out of every 122. So a typical small town elementary school, well, you'll have at least one child who has uncorrectable vision loss, 20/40 or worse. And so this is 1 out of every 137 children ages 1 to 11, or 1 out of every 102 children ages 12 to 17. So we can even further segment by those age ranges. Showing some of the disparities, we have 1 out of every 89 Black children have vision loss, and 1 out of every 1,000 are permanently blind. And looking at the costs for this, that's another reason we need to be looking at this kind of data and implementing the legislation that EDVI offers, is that vision problems cost our US economy in the pediatric population about $140 billion every year. And so EDVI, as Sara mentioned, will offer grants to states to begin to establish and or improve their children's vision and eye health system. And as the states apply for these grants, they're going to be asked to frame out how they will complete 3 out of 6 pillars that are outlined in the grant process. So the 6 pillars that this includes are to implement early detection practices and intervention initiatives to identify children in need of eye care. The second is to improve state-level data collection and management to help improve performance improvement standards and uniformity in children's vision and eye health guidelines. The third pillar is to connect children to eye care, expanding access to eye care and addressing barriers that improve eye health outcomes. The fourth is to facilitate parent education and public awareness. As I mentioned, many parents don't understand what that connection is for children's vision, what it should be looking like, or how to engage to improve their children's vision and eye health. The fifth is to establish coordinated systems of care that reflect a care continuum, not just early detection and referral to eye care, but making sure that kids are getting diagnosis, further intervention, and follow-up for children that will include vision rehabilitation services, special education support services, so that the whole child is supported in what they need for their vision. And then finally, providing wraparound services for the future of independent living. So making sure that kids have everything they need related to their vision and eye health and their future of independent living.
Hi, Kira. Somebody had asked a question. This is Helen.
Sure.
Colleen asked, have you considered including data from babies' count in your research?
I don't believe we looked at that data, but I will try and catch this web address here, and then I will share that with NORC as we look to update the data to see if that's possible. I appreciate her pointing that out. And then the other piece that Sara mentioned is that establishing a National Technical Assistance Center. And so this is an important component because as we want to start out grants to states, probably only about 5 to 10 states will receive a grant as this program gets started, but really everybody can benefit from best practices, from understanding how they can be best supporting children's vision and eye health. So that's the role of the National Technical Assistance Center. It will support any state, whether they have received a grant or not, to help share established resources, best practices, help them analyze their legislation that they may have in the state. But also the Technical Assistance Center will be doing some of that national surveillance, sharing that data to help guide public health practices, and then also conducting research to continue to grow and define those best practices. So it's something that'll really benefit all states throughout the US.
So we're incredibly excited about this bill, by using one of the programs that has been so successful for another aspect of sensory health in children. We really think that we have a very strong approach for the EDVI Act, but it's still definitely going to be a very long journey to make sure that we can actually get this bill from being an idea into reality, and that is by having it signed into law, passing Congress and getting that to the president's desk for signature. And even though this process can be unpredictable with respect to lobbying and advocacy for this bill, but we really do need the strength of organizations within our space and even outside of the vision health space to help lift their voices and make sure that members of Congress are aware of this bill, understand the good work that it seeks to do, and really bring different perspectives about why this bill is so beneficial to everybody, no matter what, your constituency that you represent, whether it's parents or public health practitioners or data specialists, but especially children and their parents and their families. So here, the photo of the on the page here is one of a ladder. So I sort of use that to create a bit of an illusion as far as, there's a ladder of engagement when it comes to the actions that your organization can take to help pass the EDVI Act. There's always the individual aspect, of course. We do have a legislative action center where you as an individual can reach out to a member of Congress and ask them to co-sponsor the EDVI Act. We are working on a House campaign right now, but a Senate companion bill is still in the works. So if you do send a message as an individual, it would be only going to your member of your House, the House of Representatives. But as representatives for organizations, we're always welcoming endorsement for the EDVI Act. This is something that is open even to this day. It's not something that needed to happen when we introduced the bill or reintroduced the bill, or when we need to reintroduce the bill in the next Congress, probably. This is something that, when we're in meetings with legislators, they want to know what the home root connection is. So the stronger list that we have that reflects as many community organizations in as many states as possible, the better we are to ensure that there is a constituent connection to this bill, that an organization that maybe a legislator is looking for, what's the group in my state or my district that has put their support behind this bill, and who are they? This is always really helpful for us to, when we are in conversations with legislators about what kind of community support there is. A second step is your organization can write to Congressman Bilirakis and Congressman Vesey from your organization and say, we support this bill. Thank you for working to get it passed. We want this bill to pass for these reasons. And that's something that can be very easily done. And this is from a legislator's perspective. They're always looking for that kind of community support to make sure that this is something that is widely accepted as the right thing to do, something that's broadly wanted. And so when they see that there is that kind of community support, they're much more likely to work towards getting this bill a reality. Third step could be if your organization is set up to do grassroots or grass tops advocacy, and this is reaching out to your community members, those in your network to say this is an important bill, please make sure to write to your member of Congress, or, if you receive any action alert from any organization that does grassroots ever, it's like, you might have something that says, and act now to protect this, or act now to make sure that this doesn't happen, kind of a thing. This is what I'm talking about. So if your organization has this kind of setup to where you can send out grassroots advocacy alerts and do that on a regular cadence, that's certainly appreciated to make sure that people are aware of the EDVI Act and understand that there is a solution in place and that there's something that they can do to help address children's vision and eye health. Some additional steps that your organization can take is to help to elevate the EDVI Act. If you have social media, Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, these are all really great places to get the word out about the EDVI Act. Blog posts are also still incredibly useful. And we also invite letters to the editor. So if you're an organization that's closer to the ground on the community level, you see that there's a need for this, take a minute to consider writing a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, or a newspaper in the town that's over, like, Chicago or something, just to make sure that they, there's an avenue for people to know that this legislation exists and that there is a need that's out there and that your organization is behind that. as far as organizational support for the EDVI Act, each of these are steps that you can take on the ladder of engagement. It's completely up to you if you do decide to endorse the EDVI Act. Thank you, Linda. That's something that if you don't have the grassroots set up, that's completely fine. You don't need to meet all of those things to be able to throw your weight or support behind the EDVI Act. This is something that your organization, depending on the resources and the capacity that you have, can jump in and weigh in wherever possible and how possible it is, depending on what's appropriate for your group. So endorsing the EDVI Act, it really just means that you're providing the support of your organization, you're throwing your weight behind this, you support this, you're going to help, do what you can to make sure that this bill gets passed. And that can be, speaking about it to members of Congress in your own meetings if you have legislative advocacy days. Again, taking any number of those organizational steps that I just outlined, reaching out to your member of Congress in a meeting, just one-on-one, you as maybe the executive director or somebody on your staff doing that, and really just helping them understand that the EDVI Act is important policy, working to get co-sponsors and making sure that House members are aware that your organization is supportive of this. If your organization does support the legislation, we do include that on a list of supporting groups. Thank you, Kira. And this list is given to Hill staffers who use this information to determine, what kind of support is out there for a policy of this nature. And is it incredibly important because, how big is the community of stakeholders behind this? The bigger that list, the longer that list, and the more organizations that appear on that list, the more that a Hill staffer is going to take a look at this as something that's very seriously wanted. It's been properly vetted through the community. It's good policy, has broad support behind it. So more than likely, they're going to use that information to relay to their boss that this is something that they should jump on board with and help to make happen. So that broad community voice, this is always something that when we talk to legislators, Kira and I, we always want to say that, these are the organizations who are behind it, really demonstrate that this is something that is very broadly wanted by the community, and not just in vision and eye health, but children's groups, family groups, school health groups, and a number of different organizations to ensure that, they're aware that there's a community of support behind this. And that, again, this is something that the community itself has done the work on understanding, has, promoted and pushed for, and really, really wants and sees this as a good approach forward. All of this matters when speaking with legislators who, sometimes might not know the issue of children's vision and eye health as much as we do, but bringing this information to them, that's one of the first things that they look for, is how many groups are supporting this bill, so that they can be aware of just how important it is to one particular community or another, and this will help them make a decision whether to support that. So endorsing the EDVI Act, we are certainly welcoming organizations to sign on to that. There will be information on that in a slide or two. Right now that we are accepting organizational endorsements from public or private nonprofit organizations or community groups, preferably not those in the industry side of things at this point, but reach out to me if you're one of those people and you have some questions about that. I would also like to mention, I have personally spoken to board or leadership. If your organization has a committee, an advocacy committee that wants to learn more about the EDVI Act, I have definitely done that to help encourage organizations to support this and to kind of inform and share the word about this legislation. I'm always very happy to do that. My contact information is at the end of this slide. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have those discussions and get your organization to a place where they could lend their support to this important legislation. So just a really quick recap of just what I said. If organizational endorsement and advocacy is something that's brand new to you, here's some of the things that are first to start out with. Again, endorsing the EDVI Act, you can send an email to me. Again, that's at the end of this slide deck. You can also write a letter of support from your organization, and that really helps to say, we're an organization that represents, for example, special educators for the blind and visually impaired. Here's why this bill is important, because X, Y, and Z. That's something that's always open. There's a template at the link that's on this slide deck where you can use that support letter to kind of fill in the blanks and kind of use that to emulate your own organization's voice and perspective about this bill. Again, if you have grassroots, grass tops, so if you know that your executive director is going to be in Washington and taking meetings, and you want to just have a quick nudge about the bill and just say, we're here to talk about other, these other priorities that are important to our organization, but we also want to make mention of the EDVI Act, and here's what that is, and happy to give you information. We do have some tools and resources available to allow you that capability to be able to speak about the EDVI Act and make sure that it's mentioned, or if you want to even include that as part of your legislative agenda for your organization, feel free to include that as well too. We have all of those resources available for organizations. In addition to social media, blog posts, letters to the editors, all, these templates and resources are available at the link that's on the slide deck. I do hope that that will be sent out, but I'm happy to connect your organization if you have any interest in doing any of these activities or others. So I think this is the closing slide of this presentation. Again, my email appears on the screen as SaraBrown@preventblindness.org. Kira's is as well. We really love to see some strong community activity and engagement around passing the EDVI Act. This is a quote that I provided to Helio some months ago. Passing this legislation is going to require broad support and widespread persistent action from all stakeholders to become a reality for children, their families, seeking early interventive and sight-saving care. So I'll end with that call to action. Let's work together to pass the EDVI Act. Thank you very much. Lee, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sara and Kira, for your wonderful work on this. So needed. Do we have any questions or comments? Not here.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted.
Oh, there you go.
Hear me now, Lee?
Hi, Linda. Yes, we can hear
Hi.
you. Please go ahead and ask that.
Great presentation, ladies. I am all for this. I am a huge fan. I'm a mother of 5 children, and many people have heard me say we have to have a full physical in order to play tennis, but we don't have to get our eyes checked to go to school. It makes no sense to me at all. So I'm a huge fan of the endeavor. We're happy. My agency in Pennsylvania is happy to endorse, reach out to our legislators, etc. We will do whatever we can. However, for planning purposes for the agency, I'm curious how this might impact our existing vision screening program in preschools. And I said in my question, our numbers have fallen dramatically since COVID. I think because preschools and public schools purchased their own screening equipment during the shutdown. But, we're still hanging in here. And we actually have a number of schools who called and said, actually, we'd like you to come back. This is harder than we thought it was. We'll do the onesie twosies. We'll do the new kid in school who enters mid-year, but would you come back and do the groups? But what do you see happening to statewide screening programs?
I'll kick it off, and Sara, if I miss anything, definitely add to. But thank you, Linda, first for the support, and you guys have always been great partners in Pennsylvania. And I appreciate that some of the schools are coming back to you because there's no replacing quality services and the expertise that you bring to vision screening and early detection.
Right.
It would be my anticipation that putting EDVI in place and getting state by state granting and support would actually increase your customer base, because then there would be a statewide requirement or initiative to improve things across the board. So it wouldn't just be a school system here or there, but there would be an initiative across the state to see improved efforts. And with that, there would be an increased need for technical assistance services. It would also elevate your organization and put you in the position to be a collaborator with the state as their approaches are put together. Typically, these states that are trying to improve their systems are looking to partners out there that are going to be working across that spectrum. Now, remember, I said there are 6 pillars.
I did read those.
So
Yes.
they're going to need guidance and input from all the customers that are addressing those different pillars. So hopefully it would increase your engagement with the state to improve the system, but also increase customer base as they're trying to address the statewide process.
Thank you very much, Kira. And I actually have one other question related. In Pennsylvania, there is a movement on the state level by the Pennsylvania Optometric Association to mandate an actual eye exam by an optometrist or ophthalmologist before a child enters school. I'm assuming your effort is actually different than that.
Yes, it is.
And are you in contact with each other? Are you in communication with each other? Or is this something just completely separate?
So this is, and Sarah, you may have more to add here as well, but this is a national initiative that
Right?
would be providing grants and guidance to individual states to improve the system. And the movement to establish a mandated eye exam within Pennsylvania would just be a state effort alone. But
Okay.
this would be an initiative where, you know, we've seen this in other states. Sadly, there's no data that comes out of those kinds of efforts to demonstrate whether it's impacting things or not, beyond the fact that there is less vision screening that happens in schools. There's less vision screening that happens in pediatric practices because everybody just assumes kids would get an eye exam. And as we know, there's a lot of barriers and reasons people don't get to eye care. So we're strong believers in that there's no one single effort, one magic bullet that's going to get everybody to the eye care that they need. That's why we're taking this systems approach with EDVI and really working to strengthen those areas of the system that need to be improved across the boards. But we've seen this and would be happy to talk about some individual advocacy steps. Sarah, is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, excuse me. I think you covered it, Kira. I think, yeah, it's definitely important to stress to everyone on the call that the EDVI Act is federal legislation. It would cover all states, all territories. You might see some different efforts that are at the state level, much to what Linda was saying, but the EDVI Act is really, you know, focuses on that system of care. So there's no one right entry point or there's not one singular entry point. And, you know, after, you know, one thing happens, there's a next step, and making sure that that next step is followed through on, and that ultimately the child and family are receiving the care and the services that they need, if those things are important and essential to their eye care journey. Yeah, thank you so much for elevating that to us, Linda. And Kira, thanks for your answer.
Thank you both.
There is another question in the Q&A, and says, I apologize if I missed it, but can you share a little more about requirements / protocols for children that have needs beyond glasses?
So with the EDVI strategy, with one of the pillars that we hope states will adopt and work on, it's that follow-up beyond just, you know, the basic treatment, the basic pair of eyeglasses or a patching, but making sure that children that do have a long-term chronic or progressive vision loss and or blindness are actually connected to supportive services. So that they're connected to vision rehabilitation, those special learning supports that they can get for school. So if the state is really looking to improve that broad part of its system, to say, okay, what do we have in our state? Where will we be referring kids to? And then making sure that those responsible for that referral and tracking what care that the child receives, that they're getting that part of the spectrum as well, that they get referred, they get connected to vision rehabilitation services. So it's the hope with EDVI that this elevates the fantastic services that you're all providing. So people aren't saying things like, I was lucky enough to find the vision center in my community. I was lucky enough to get connected with an orientation and mobility specialist. Nobody should be lucky enough. We believe that kids should be getting all of the services they need to support wherever they are in their vision journey.
I have a question. Can you hear me? I'm in the car.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yep, Allison, go ahead.
So I missed the very beginning because I was a little bit late, but would any of the recommendations or guidance address before school age? So like we work in the early intervention space, and you know, we get a lot of referrals from families who failed their newborn hearing screening, but there's not a newborn vision screening, and other than ROP screenings for preemies. So I'm curious if any of this would apply to even younger age children.
Yes, and Kira just came off mute really quickly. Allison, I just got your email. Thank you so much for your engagement. Very much appreciate that.
Yes, big fan of this, but yes.
Kira.
Yes, I was going to say we do want this to be a supportive program for kids of all ages. So in the case where a child is in the newborn nursery and they're found to have ROP, or some other condition that has an impact on vision health, we want to make sure that those families are receiving the supportive services. You know, they're going to need to be aware of early intervention. They're going to need to be aware of what kinds of vision support services are going to be there for their child as they're growing and learning and needing to be working towards independent living long term. So that's certainly part of the work that you all are providing. So it's not just for school age kids. It's not just for preschool kids, but it's for any child. However early we can get them into identification, get them to the care they need, get them to the support services. It's not age dependent in any way.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Allison. We
And the endorsement.
we have just a few minutes left. Anybody else? Okay, so we'll wrap it up. We will have a recording available of this, and you may have the slides. We will give that to everyone who has registered. And Kira and Sarah's information are in those. So please reach out and give them some ideas and share this with others that will be interested. You think it's going to be a worthwhile program? Do we need this?
Can I say one more thing, Lee, that I didn't get a chance to say earlier? Another way that would be super helpful for us and to help pass this is capturing stories. You know, we have all kinds of data. Certainly we have colorful maps, but nothing will sway a legislator or their staff person faster than a story that they can be thinking of as they're trying to decide whether to move this bill along or not. So you guys have fabulous connections to those with stories. Even each of you, you know, that identified yourselves as parents, that you see the need for this. If you want to share your story with us, or look for those in your systems that you work with that may have a great story, we would love to have those, especially as we're going to be reaching out to offices again. So please share those with us.
I'm sure everybody on this call has stories to share, Kira, so hope they will. Thanks for the work you do. Thank you, Kira. Thank you, Sarah.